Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday. Oh, it's Whiskey Friday. That's right. I just saw a reminder of that on Blue Sky. We made it to the first one, everybody. The first official Whiskey Friday on CBS News, except we don't really know whether they're doing Whiskey Fridays. Don't know whether they intended to launch it this Friday. But now I guess we get to watch and wait and see. And I suppose if it turns out not to be Whiskey Friday this evening on, I guess, the evening news, I imagine, and not the morning news, on CBS, then, I don't know, we say they chickened out. CBS always chickened out. I guess Kako, I don't know. Anyway, they may just not be ready yet, or it may just have been some dumb idea that somebody cooked up and it didn't go anywhere in a chain of command. Could have been an outside, nonsense thing that someone made up and CBS never had any intention of doing it. I don't know. Anyway, it was a funny idea, and the funniest part about it was that the putative sponsor for it, Jack Daniels, is distancing themselves. No, please. We're not involved in any sort of advertising scheme on CBS. Though they may give in later on. Who knows? Anyway, so I guess we'll be excited and try and find out whether or not they're really going to roll this thing out, and if they do, whether it has any sponsor or whether they drink whiskey on the set or what. I'm curious to see what they do with it. We could make it Whiskey Friday, certainly. We are a morning show. I guess we have overseas listeners where it's afternoon, and I guess it's evening elsewhere. I guess we could be, what time is it in Australia? Anyway, we got to find a place where there's a big whiskey culture and promote ourselves there. It's good for, I find it's good for clearing the throat as well. It's as good as any of these teas, certainly. Though it's Scott's teas that I'm enjoying. We could get a tea sponsorship. I wonder. Brandon Freeman's got a tea business of his own, I think, right? And I guess we could be working out a sponsorship deal, except, do I want to, has he got money to hand out from that thing? Do they do sponsorship deals? If they do, they should do it on this show, and we'll drink their teas. All right. In the meantime, time to roll on with the news, and there's lots of it. I don't know where to start. It's chaos, of course, still in Minneapolis. Also, I guess the weather report is icy conditions, believe it or not, materializing in central Florida now as well, as local Democratic members of Congress are warning constituents that there's an increase in ice activity there. That would make sense for the ice troops who now are facing a real turn in the weather, I guess, in Minneapolis, and are likely to want to get the hell out of Dodge before it gets too super cold. They're having a difficult time with the weather as it is. I note for the record, by the way, I think I saw Kevin Cruz pointing out on Blue Sky that protesters, normal everyday people who just want ice to get the hell out of their neighborhood, I don't even know whether there's any protest involved in it, are dousing the sidewalks with buckets of water. I guess they must be protesters if they're doing it outside of the ice facilities there. And I think Kevin had joked essentially that this was like Macaulay Culkin. They were going to do this like Macaulay Culkin in Home Alone, and then suddenly, a couple days later, poof, they actually were doing this. I guess it wouldn't have taken very long to think of that. Ice is sort of an art form, an art medium in Minnesota anyway. But anyway, he was proud of having predicted that as a tactic. Even, I don't know whether he would necessarily say, I recommend it and think it's a great thing to do to people, but he did predict it. There's also weird news today. I noticed, I'll make mention of it, as Justice was giving me his thumbs up that everything is A-okay and running. Kyrsten Sinema is back in the news, right? And for something dumb, because that's the only thing she makes news in now. And now she's out of the Senate, and so people are like, I don't care how dumb she is. why do we care? I don't know. So she's involved in some sort of weird situation in which she's being sued. I guess she was having an affair with one of her security guards and broke up the guy's marriage. And I guess the other partner in the marriage is suing them over it. And I don't know what to say about that, except I'm glad her life is difficult, I guess. And whatever. I don't know. So, I mean, it doesn't make any real difference for any of the rest of us. But I guess if you're mad still at Kyrsten Sinema and want to see things go wrong for her, I guess it's happening now. But I guess you should wait for the outcome of the lawsuit. Many, many other things happening today. And the worst in terms of what's being videotaped in Minneapolis and shared with the rest of us. That's, of course, the point of videotaping all of it. I did happen to see just before coming on the air, and now I'm sure I have lost the... Oh, did I? Or unless I did repost. Oh, it did. Well, so handy for all of us. Joshua Reed Eagle, maybe Eakle. Eagle, but with a K instead of a G. Does that help anybody? And who are you, Josh? I don't know. Let's see if there's any way we can say anything about... We'll give everybody a read of your bio so everyone knows. Once on the right, now liberal. So maybe that's it. He changed the G in Eagle. And fighting for a free and open society with projectliberal.org. I am unaware of its work, but husband and father. Views are his own. So, what can I tell you? Anyway, he has found a video, I guess. Is sharing it. Can I enlarge and see whose video this is? Probably not, because it's... But anyway, does that say good morning, bad news? Possibly. And I don't know whether that is a person's user handle on whatever social media platform. Anyway, the point is, this is a video showing ICE holding children hostage to bait parents out of their homes. As Josh says, and I think correctly, this is just unspeakable levels of cruelty and inhumanity, though I did just speak him. And yeah, I mean, that's basically it. The ICE agents are holding onto a 5-year-old girl outside of the house of a person they want to lure out and grab and snatch and take away, which, of course, they're supposed to have warrants for those sorts of things. You should be able to go and get her regardless. You don't need to hold her daughter hostage if you have a real warrant, but they don't have that. So there you have it. How nice. And mom is shouting out the door, come on, this is not fair. She's autistic. She's on the spectrum. She's crying. And they're like, yeah, she is. She said she wants her mom. Come on out here and get her. They're really, making a spectacle of themselves, to say the very least. These guys are not wearing masks. I guess they're proud enough of the work that they're doing here, although this is taking place somewhere in a nice temperate zone. So maybe these are the South Florida folks that we were being warned about, because it's still balmy and green here where this video comes from. I had thought, my memory of it was it might be happening up in Minneapolis where all the rest of the video is coming from, but no. So there's some evidence that they're operating in more than one place at a time, though not necessarily with as much flash or flashbang, for that matter, elsewhere. But yet they have limited ability to project their operations into more than one place at a time. Also circulating this morning, the video of a woman who encounters Greg Bovino outside of the local convenience store, a Speedway store, which are they in Minneapolis? I can't tell. It doesn't look like it's super cold where it's going on. So maybe they've all moved on. We'll see whether that's cold weather gear. But this is filmed it was distributed by someone on Blue Sky under the handle of Egg16Z, but the handle itself actually being not like we at bluesky.social, but not at, it's dot, You know how they do that thing. It's very difficult and makes it hard to roll this off. Anyway, but the video is the work of someone who's been in the online, I guess, news before. And this, as Egg here, points out this is the woman in the video, the lawyer, and I'm sure there are many, but a lawyer who quit Skadden Arps, one of the big law firms, early on when they caved, by the way, to the Trump administration, for anyone who doesn't know or recognize her. And that is pretty interesting. And then he finds her account on Blue Sky. If you're interested in finding the video or following along, it's probably a little easier to find this name, a little less crazy, or her name, Rachel Cohen, and it's Rachel. It is, I don't know why I emphasize the E, but it's Rachel Cohen. She goes under Cohen, Cohen, Cohen489.bluesky.social, and there you have it. So she's got her own account there, and you can follow her. If you see this video and then find that you enjoy it, I guess we could. I won't play it because it's a little lengthy. Anyway, but she's very funny. She's just doing her thing, and she encounters Greg Bovino, and she notices, and this is the thrust of the video, hey, I'm here and I see Greg Bovino, of all people, is right here in the flesh, and I just wanted to note for the record, there's like a 4-inch height difference between Greg Bovino and everybody surrounding him. And once again, he's on, they're on piss detail. I think it's really interesting that like the biggest, toughest guys, I guess, is the ones he's picked for some reason, to surround him because he doesn't want to be attacked. But it does make him look kind of weird and weirdly short, even though, I think he's not himself weirdly short, but when he surrounds himself with big guys, it looks that way. And anyway, it's also interesting that he does this all the time and they stop in for him to use the bathroom. Is there anything wrong with him? Does he have to go to the bathroom too much? I don't know. I guess that's just one of those things for older guys. They got to go to the bathroom all the time. And it's just happening now for Greg Bovino. But he was famously filmed the other day on his way out of a Target restroom. But likewise, in addition to, surrounding himself with security guards who are 4 inches taller than him, they post up like they're some kind of, crack security force to guard his bathroom breaks. It's really kind of weird. They post people outside the outer doors of the store and then the inner doors of the store, and then, line up and, grab their belts and puff their chests out outside the bathroom while he's in there peeing. And I'm just I think that's kind of odd that, the elite troops get put on piss detail for Greg Bovino. It's kind of weird. It's also, I guess you could phrase it this way and say it's kind of weird that every time he wants to make a pit stop, he puts together a crack squad of the biggest, brawniest guys he can find and say, follow me into the bathroom. And, in other places, people might say that's indicative of some otherwise, we'll say, on the clock, unprofessional behavior. Anyway, I guess on your own time, you can do whatever you want. Anywho, here he is outside of the Speedway, and Rachel Cohen gives him what for out there and basically says it right in front of him, and he's listening. It's obvious. He reacts in the tape and says, I've got nothing against short men. I just don't think this is nice the way they're doing the things that they're doing. And I don't know whether she's in Minneapolis or not. If she is, she's used to the cold weather. She hasn't even got a hat on. Neither is Bovino, I don't think. Anyway, he thinks it's hilarious that she's, he tries to make it look like he thinks it's hilarious that she's making fun of his height because he starts, getting up on his tiptoes there and making himself taller, quite obviously, playing along with the video. Anyway, she then goes on to say, all right, well, while I have you here, even though you're right over there, I'm going to say this to the camera, basically, F you, Greg Bovino. I hope you never sleep at night. I hope this haunts you forever, et cetera, et cetera. But curses him out a little bit. And he says, by the way, it should be pointed out, parked, of course, right in front of the Speedway as all the ICE vehicles. And she's positioned next to some of them. And Bovino thinks he's going to shame her by saying, oh, nice language. There's children here, And she's like, there's children in your vehicle? Joke, a-hole. Like, yeah, that was pretty interesting. I guess he thought he was going to score a point off of her on that one. And no dice. All right, well done to Rachel Cohen. Not only for, I guess, making her way out of Skadden Arps, giving up probably a pretty good paying and certainly career building job at Skadden, when they caved in to Trump. And now activist, maybe she was already activist, online and producing fun videos for all of us to try to make it through this hellhole for one day at a time. Okay, let's see. Any other fun and interesting things happening besides the weird fraud notice that just popped up on my texts, which is odd because it itself is probably a fraud. Oh, well. We'll take a look at that one afterwards and see what's happening. That was very distracting. Anyway, I have other stories set aside for you besides what's circulating online, although there's plenty of that, so I'll keep the channel open, so to speak, and see what else is happening. But by way of planned plays, we have to bring you this story. Greg mentioned it the other day, but we really didn't give it very much time. I guess we didn't have very much in the way of detail, but it is an important and weird development in what's going on in Minneapolis, and my brother Mark has sent on an article about it as well, so we'll use that as a good excuse to bring you more detail on the Oglala Sioux tribal members who are in ICE custody. And we all have questions about, those of you who have read the articles already probably don't have this same question. Although, honestly, I scanned the article and I still do have questions. What claim might immigration officers have to hold Native Americans? Like, on what grounds would you do that? Other than, well, they have different colored skin and pigmentation, and that makes me think, I don't know, Mexican, and they can't tell, or they're just harassing everybody they can. So I guess the story does hint at how they might have come into their custody in the first place. There are 4 originally in ICE custody. One has been released, and I guess they were living with a homeless encampment in the area, and ICE probably figured prime target. Probably some people that we could reasonably suspect of being immigrants. And remember here, they're no longer even trying to get people who are in the country illegally, whatever that might mean, or bothering to check on their any criminal records they may have. Basically, they're happily arresting people with green cards, with who are U.S. citizens, and saying, if you've been a naturalized U.S. citizen, that doesn't count. What we're after is where you were born. Now, so they're like nativist, racist targeting people as well. And people have, I guess, I don't know what to say, grown like these incredibly steely outer exoskeletons. The disposition in dealing with threatening officers. I've seen some great video out of Minneapolis from Somali Americans, or featuring Somali Americans who are just standing firm with these guys demanding ID and show me your ID. And like, I don't have to show you ID. I'm an American citizen, and you don't ask people for ID on the street. There's no reason for it. No one ever has done it. It's un-American to do so. Well, if you're American, show me your ID. Like, no, that's the point. And not only that, but then saying I'm a U.S. citizen, and they're saying, yeah, but where were you born? Like, that's just where that's something that, people who are casually in the business of being social racists might demand. But as officers, enforcing immigration code, there's no reason for them to be going in that direction. Anyway, about the Oglala Sioux members, there are now 3 tribal members still under arrest or whatever, being detained in Minneapolis in ICE detention. Graham Lee Brewer is the writer of the piece for the AP. The president of Oglala Sioux tribe in South Dakota, and, it's nearby, state-wise, on Tuesday called for the immediate release of tribal members who were detained at a homeless encampment by Immigration and Customs agents in Minnesota last week. By the way, I also will say, ICE reported injecting themselves all over the place. Even if you are flying through the Minneapolis airport, apparently, the airport is full of them. And they're even in the jetways. Like, if you think you've made it past security and now it's great and finally you're going to fly back home and get out of trouble with these guys, they're in the the jetways and will nab you like literally as you're trying to step onto the plane now. In fact, it is rumored that they, as someone has claimed on Blue Sky anyway, that a friend who works there told me, so I don't know how reliable that is. It doesn't make it sound reliable when you frame it that way. But that they're even asking for papers from the TSA people. They are in uniform and working. So my suspicion is that as they were making their way, trying to bypass security to get to the gates to harass people there, and the TSA people said, I'll have to check with my supervisor about whether it's okay to let guys with guns through. Like, I see that you think you're official, and I might even believe you're official, but I think I should check with somebody. Oh, yeah, well, give me your papers. Wow. Probably the way that went down. All right. Stop speculating and read what Graham Lee Brewer says about our poor friends from the Oglala Sioux tribe in ICE custody. 3 of the 4 Oglala Sioux tribe members who were arrested in Minneapolis on Friday. And that is a particular term of art. Are we sure they've been arrested and processed and everything? I mean, you kind of hope so, because that'll trigger some legal rights and some procedures that they can use to get out of there. But if they've just been seized, I don't know what to do. All right. Well, anyway, this is the interesting part, the nuance of it. They've been transferred to an ICE facility at Fort Snelling, which might not ring a bell for you, doesn't ring a bell for me, but I've read the article, so now it does ring a bell, and we'll tell you what bell it is. This is according to president of the Oglala Sioux tribe, whose name is Frank Starr Comes Out. I always find those names fascinating and interesting, and we've lost that descriptive aspect of our names, and we just forget that they actually once meant something too. And anyway, President Frank Starr Comes Out, and I like that one. Anyway, he said in a statement released with a memorandum that he sent to federal immigration authorities to try to do something about this. The Oglala Sioux tribe's memorandum makes clear that tribal citizens are not aliens and are categorically outside immigration jurisdiction, Starr Comes Out says. That's the point I would hope he's making. Enrolled tribal members are citizens of the United States by statute and citizens of the Oglala Sioux Nation by treaty. Details about the circumstances that led to their detention were unclear. In the memorandum sent to Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, Starr Comes Out said, when the tribal nation reached out to the agency, it was provided only with the first names of the men. Homeland Security refused to release more information unless the tribe, quote, entered into an immigration agreement with ICE, unquote. And I'm very curious, again, about what the agreement would be about. I guess you could make an argument that it would make some sense if they're looking for help from tribal police authorities, if people who would be subject to jurisdiction of immigration officers come into your jurisdiction and you apprehend them, will you give them to us? Maybe like an agreement to not harbor people fleeing immigration police? I don't know. Anyway, this idea of I'll only give you their first names, I won't identify them, and I won't give you any more information unless you agree to this procedure, doesn't square with anybody's idea of how American justice works. DHS did not immediately respond to a request for comment on Tuesday evening. Starr Comes Out said the tribe has no plans to enter into an agreement with ICE, and nobody should plan it, certainly. In a post to his Facebook page, Starr Comes Out says that the 4 detained tribal members are experiencing homelessness and were living under a bridge in Minneapolis. One of the members was released from detention. That's good news, I think, and we should find out whether it's something you can use to leverage out the others. In the press release, he demanded information on the status of the 3 men in detention, the release of all tribal citizens in ICE custody, and a meeting between the tribe and the government. Now, here's the important part, I think, for the nuance and context. Fort Snelling has a troubling history for indigenous people. It was the first military outpost in the area, and Dakota people were held prisoner there during the Dakota War of 1862, an armed conflict between the U.S. and Native Americans, said Nick Estes, an associate professor of American Indian Studies at the University of Minnesota and a member of the Lower Brule Sioux tribe. I hope I've pronounced it correctly, B-R-U-L-E Sioux tribe. It has this really notorious anti-indigenous, specifically anti-Dakota history, Estes said. It's kind of like a continuation on the monopoly of violence from the military outpost to the ICE facility. It's not the first time in recent months that ICE agents have detained tribal members. Last year, elected leaders in the Navajo Nation said that tribal citizens in Arizona and New Mexico reported being stopped and detained by ICE officers. I saw a video of that every once in a while. In November, a member of the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community in Arizona, who had been arrested in Iowa, was mistakenly scheduled to be deported before the error was caught and she was released. I'm thankful that errors were caught and it made a difference. The same month, Elaine Miles, a member of the Confederated Tribes. Why did I get into this? I knew this would be trouble at the end, too. Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation in Oregon, and an actress known for her roles in Northern Exposure and The Last of Us, said she was stopped by ICE officers in Washington State who told her that her tribal ID looked fake. But, that's ridiculous, of course, on its face. But this is something they do with everybody. If you produce documentation, doesn't matter whether it's tribal or from the federal government or state government, they just say it looks fake to see if they can, make you nervous or that you'll submit to arrest. All right. Indigenous rights groups as well as the Red Lake Band of Chippewa Indians have established places in Minneapolis where tribal citizens can apply for tribal ID cards in case they are approached by ICE and need to provide ID. There's just a little bit more. One more paragraph and I can't fit it in, but we'll be right back. Hi, everyone. It's me, Commercial Guy, this time here to remind you that there are a number of ways you can support the show even without spending a dime, except for the dime that you spent on internet access so you could hear the show. Ignore that one. Anyway, I'm talking about feeding the evil algorithms that make the modern internet tick. When those YouTubers and TikTokers plead with you to smash that like button or subscribe so you never miss an episode, or even just leave a comment, it's because they know that it makes the algorithms more likely to recommend their content to other users. And they must know what they're talking about because their shows have millions of subscribers. And mostly those shows are terrible. We rule. So go find us on YouTube, find us on Libsyn, Stitcher, or Patreon, or Spotify, TuneIn, Apple, Amazon, Pandora, and then like us, love us, post a comment, ring the bell, punch the clown, shock the monkey, whatever you're supposed to do on that platform to make that algorithm think we're cool. Thanks so much for helping us blindly walk into Skynet's oblivion, but maybe with a little extra coin in our pockets. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Show me your ID. All right, you can't continue listening unless you enter into an agreement with me and show me your ID. The last paragraph that I, talked my way out of being able to share and actually accomplish the mission of finishing the AP article by Graham Lee Brewer here was just that Mary Lagarde, the executive director of the Minneapolis American Indian Center, says about this Indigenous Rights Center where you can go and get your tribal ID card. I never thought I'd have to have my tribal ID hanging around my neck, but I do. So it's just, it's important that they have proper identification on them and not to panic. And it's hard to, of course, just tell people don't panic, but it happens. So again, indigenous right groups as well as the Red Lake Band of Chippewa Indians have established this place. If you're in the area of Minneapolis and a tribal member and you need a tribal ID card, you can go there and they will help you out. And then when you get stopped by ICE, ICE will say it looks fake, but you'll have it. And it'll be tremendous content if it happens to get on video as well. But I hope you never have to use it. Anyway, I totally remember seeing the news from the other day when Elaine Miles, that's her name, the actress who was stopped in Oregon. Is that right? Or where was she stopped? She was stopped in Washington. And they said, your tribal ID looks... I remember her as, what was her character name? Marilyn. She's the receptionist who works for the doctor whose character's name I don't even remember anymore. Joel, was it Joel or was it something else? Although now I see that there's The Last of Us and that had a Joel in it too. Does she only work in movies or TV shows that have Joel characters in them? Anyway, I remember her very well. She was very famous. And, I don't know. Most of the ICE agents are probably born after that show was on the air, so you never know. Anyway, or even if they recognized her, they were going to say that her ID looks fake because they're racists. So come on. All right. Thanks for sending that along, Mark. I think that was important to double back on. We really didn't give it enough time. We found out about it at the end of the show, and there wasn't much information available. It was just a weird and outrageous story. I still don't know what kind of agreement ICE thinks they need to have with tribal nations, but perhaps that will become clear in the days to come. Okay. By the way, so big discussion online and elsewhere about all sorts of crazy things. Like, I noticed a trend on Blue Sky in particular. Jamel Bowie, I think, with good reason, engaging folks on the tip over into possible doomerism if you are online spending tremendous amounts of your time saying things like, yeah, well, why even bother with the midterm elections? They're probably going to be canceled anyway, or Trump's going to cheat in them, or he's going to suppress the vote. Now, all of that is probably true, but I guess where he hangs up is the cancellation of the elections. I mean, he does point out, and it's worth pointing out, everybody is going forward as if those elections are going to happen. And I guess at this point, there's little reason to believe that they just flat out won't happen, like they won't hold them. But this administration does tend to turn on a dime and try to block things that are like, no, this will take you a year or more to lay the groundwork for this. And they just do it. So, don't count them out of anything. But, lots of effort being put in on behalf of or by the administration to try to force, say, redistricting in Republican states. It's the mixed bag. Some states they're able to force into doing it. Other states have balked. Of course, it's also forcing a reaction among Democratic-controlled states to undo that or to counterbalance that with their own redistricting. And some of the Republican states that they're approaching are worried ahead of time and look to avoid it, or perhaps say, oops, we shouldn't have done it this way because they turn out to be what Greg was telling us, or people are calling dummy manders, that they pursue gerrymandering so aggressively that they end up giving people Republican or putative Republican members from those districts too small of a Republican advantage to be of help in a blue wave election that might be coming. Anyway, but Jamel was basically saying, why would they be going through all of this work? And even when people point out to me, oh, well, they're laying the groundwork to cheat here or suppress the vote there or do something like, well, they're doing that in preparation for something, right? And that something is the midterm elections. So again, then I guess it gets to, well, are we now quibbling over what cancel the elections actually means? I mean, I guess I would say it would be wrong to say the elections were canceled if they fully went through with them, but also tried everything they could to try to suppress the vote. They happened. They might not be free and fair elections, depending on how much suppression they succeed in putting forth. Well, how would we even phrase that one? I want that sentence back. Anyway, you get the idea. So, that would be an election that certainly happened, but might not be free and fair. So, I don't know. I mean, I guess it makes a certain amount of sense to say, all right, well, I'm not necessarily in the camp of those who believe that the elections are not going to happen. But I do caution you, again, there's some very weird ideas in the administration about timelines for things. Like, for instance, I'm a little bit worried that we could pull the trigger on whatever plans, to the extent there are any plans, on Greenland and do it prematurely and botch it, perhaps. But this is the sort of thing that I guess if you ask me, what's a reasonable time frame for doing this unreasonable thing? Normally, I would say, well, I think they're building up towards something and they got to find the right moment, whatever it is. But Trump just does things like, I'm going to post on Truth Social that Greenland is now an American protectorate, and we have to decide whether that's real or not real, and whether it's part of the plan or not, and I don't know. So, like I said, this administration tends to turn on a dime and say things like, we're going to deport lots and lots of people, and then boom, all of a sudden they're there, instead of having a ramp-up period to it. So it's with a note of caution that I say, it doesn't look like they're up to canceling ahead of time the 2026 midterm elections. But I also would caution you that negating the elections, like if you were going to quibble with me after this, all right, let's say they go through with the elections, suppression and everything, and they do all the cheating they can possibly do at the margins, but they hold what otherwise appear to be, to most people, normal elections. I didn't get stopped on the way to cast my ballot. It appears they've counted lots of ballots for Democrats and lots of Democrats won. And maybe even it appears that it looks like they're in position to win control of the House of Representatives. At that point, can you say, well, the elections weren't canceled? You could if you weren't also looking forward and anticipating the possibility of some real wild and crazy cheating before that Congress actually got seated. And here's my big quibble with Jamel Bowie and all of this as he's going through. I'm trying to point this out to him, but I don't know. He doesn't want to hear it. He's got 10,000 people yelling at him all the time. He's not going to notice my yelling at him. Anyway, and I'm not yelling at him. Jamel Bowie is fantastic and brilliant and does a great job analyzing everything. This thing, not so much, as he's saying, well, I mean, when he gives his version of, well, here's how it happens. Like mechanically, Trump can't cancel the elections. This is his essential argument. Elections are held and administered and run at the state level by the states. And some of those states are controlled by Democrats. Why are they going to cancel their elections in deference to Trump? Republican states might say, Trump wants the elections canceled, so we're canceling them. They could try to get away with that. They would be sued, but they might actually be able to pull that off because they hold control of the mechanism in their hands. That is their power. The states can find a way to do that, find a mechanism by which to do that. But there's no mechanism by which, no existing legal mechanism anyway. And yeah, he even acknowledges they may do something extra legal, but there'll be a fight. It's not because Trump snaps his fingers that Democratic controlled states would cancel their elections. That is all true. But then he goes on to say, and so after that, that's it. The states hold the elections, the states certify their winners, and they go, people who won go to Washington, and they're the Congress, and that's it. Well, no, not on this show. But he does point out, like, so even if Republican states decided to cancel their elections, good, then they don't get to certify any winners and send any Republicans to Congress. And then the Democrats show up, and they form a Congress and take control of it just as they were supposed to do by winning the majority anyway. Well, there's issues with that too. But where I specifically have to object is his formulation of the process being, well, the states certify the winners and then they just show up in Washington and they're the Congress and nobody can stop them. Nope. No way. I mean, if you're going to break it down to the mechanics of installation into office, well, to borrow from the old phrase that I don't even know if anybody ever says anymore, it's very archaic, but you may recall hearing it once or twice from, I don't know, your great-grandmother or something, twixt the cup and the lip. That one, twixt the cup and the lip, there's many a slip. Well, you don't just get elected and then just, boom, you're Congress. First of all, there's a tremendous waiting period in these days. It takes forever, between November and January before you're a member of Congress. And there's that controversial part, including the oath, that some people actually still say, the oath doesn't really have anything to do with it. It's just a formality. But I was kind of sort of trying to point out that really one of the things that January 6th stood for was that there are very, very important, even if they look ceremonial and unimportant to the outside observer because they don't know about them or understand them or watch them or understand what the mechanics mean when they see them. But, you know, just as, well, in November we said we wanted Joe Biden to be the president, so he's the president come January 20th, you know, come hell or high water. Well, you know, you got to inaugurate the guy. You got to count the electoral votes. You got to certify that everything is done right and proper. And you might think it's ceremonial, but if they get there and they start counting the electoral votes and the people who are charged with the duty of determining whether or not those electoral vote certificates are regular and proper and genuine start saying they're not, you got an issue. Yeah, they might be lying. Yeah, they might be faking it. Yeah, it might be coordinated. But the people that you've designated this power to, that you've given this power to constitutionally, are exercising it, and they're saying, no, something else happened here. You got to straighten this out. It doesn't just happen. Similarly, it doesn't just happen that because Democratic officials in Democratic states have properly certified that these candidates for office have won, that they become Congress. Those certificates get forwarded to the clerk of the House, you know, and people are pointing that out, and he's saying, no. Remember, the House is renewed every 2 years. Johnson is not the speaker at the beginning of a new Congress. He has to be elected speaker again, and he's not going to be if there's a Democratic majority. So no. Well, you know, just pointing out, while that is true, the clerk of the House is the person who calls the new House to order and is the person who prepares the rolls of the names of people who will be admitted to the hall of the House as putative members elect, and then be allowed to vote in or to register their presence in the first roll call and to vote for speaker, and who would then be administered the oath of office and then can go on ahead and organize the rest of the House. But who gets to go in there? Like, you know, hey, in this interim period, is it just anybody who says they are members of the House can walk in and try and present credentials and say that, no, it doesn't really work like that either. Normally, this doesn't matter because normally we're not in a state of civil war. And you're normally not going to get a great deal of, let's say, of forged certificates of election. But some of us might remember that about 5 years ago, we got pretty much exactly that. We got forged electoral college votes that sitting members of the Senate tried to smuggle onto the House floor and pass to the clerks to pass to Mike Pence to fake the results of a presidential election. So I don't know if it's exactly settled that things just work fine if you send your certificates. So at any rate, yes, the clerk of the House is, of course, a position elected by the House, which means that they're elected by a majority of the House, which means that Republicans, now being the majority, did in fact get to name and elect and install a Republican as clerk of the House. And if the Democrats win the majority in the House, putative majority, and show up in numbers, it still don't matter. There's still a Republican as clerk of the House. Now, I should say that this guy might be a complete straight arrow and have no intention whatsoever and may be aghast at the suggestion that he would do anything partisan in the performance of his job. He would get those certificates of election from Democratic states and honor them and put his life on the line to do so. Maybe. Or he could be a total partisan hack. Or he could be a straight arrow and the Republicans might say, we should put a total partisan hack in his place while we still can. Because although there are, in fact, technically no members of the House when they convene on January 3rd, although you should note for the record, because there's nuance to everything, that they will likely convene prior to noon on January 3rd as the 119th Congress. and only then adjourn, sine die, and close out the 119th Congress, perhaps literally minutes before reconvening as the, at that point, putative 120th Congress. And when they do reconvene, though, there will be no current members of the House for a few minutes until they get around to swearing everybody in. And the person who runs that show, because who else can do it, is the clerk of the House. The clerk's term does not end with the 119th Congress. Everyone else's term does, but the clerk isn't a member of the House. They're a constitutional officer elected to the position, and by the rules of the House, and I know there's a paradox involved in this too, by the rules of the House, they say explicitly in the rules that they remain in office until they're replaced later on, and that basically that means that the term runs over from one Congress to the next, so that there will be a clerk in office to convene the putative members elect, and they can organize themselves. Somebody has to have some kind of existing authority to take the gavel and convene the room. The last speaker hasn't got it anymore. He's not a member of Congress. He's probably going to be a member of Congress in a few minutes, but he isn't one now. The clerk gets to remain. And the paradox might be apparent to you. But I thought the rules expire along with the terms of the members when they adjourn sine die, and the House has to readopt its rules every time. They do. So what's going on here? It's the resolution of a paradox in a workable framework, cognitive framework that these guys have figured out. Every time they do readopt the new rules, they readopt with them the rule that says, I know this is confusing. I know people will point to the expiration of the rules, but the House practice and precedent for the last several decades and maybe 100 years plus has been that the clerk's term carries over so that somebody has some claim to authority to convene us, because otherwise no one does, and we're in trouble. And it's not without precedent in other situations to have the clerk stand in for the House. When the House goes on recess, and even if it's only for a couple of days at a time, so that they are avoiding recess appointments over in the Senate in cooperation with them. But if they're on recess and the president sends a veto message, for instance, or there's some other important communication sent to the House, that in the olden days, if the House was not in session and there to receive the message, they said, well, the president says, I tried to deliver the veto message and you weren't here. And he was using that as a kind of fake pocket veto. I sent the veto message. You weren't around. That's not on me. That's on you. So the Congress responded to that by authorizing the clerk to accept messages on behalf of the House when they're gone. Simple, ministerial, just as counting and properly administering the certificates should be. But it's a thing that they have real power to do, and that the power matters. In a world where having the papers matters, having these papers, including messages from the president or certificates of election from the states, matters. It really does. So, I don't know. There's a huge gap in his mechanism, as Jamel describes it, which ordinarily wouldn't be a big problem, and you can smooth it over and you can figure it out. But he's out there kind of stating, in a rather haughty way, like, I encourage you, please do some reading about how things work. Well, maybe you could do a little bit of the same. There's plenty written about how the first day of a Congress works. Anyway, I just found that, annoying to say the least. And I guess I would say to you, so supposing they pulled off something crazy like this, like a Republican clerk remains in office, and what are we saying here? They would have to do something so wild and outrageous that it would never be tolerated. Like fake electoral college certificates, and also smashing your way into the House floor with a mob and trying to seize the electoral college ballots, and maybe also murder the vice president. That sort of thing, like that kind of level crazy. And that never happens. Except, on average, over the last 10 years, it's only happened once. In fact, over the last 100 years, it's only happened once. So come on. It happened 5 years ago, but whatever. So what are we talking about? We were talking about the clerk is the one who takes the certificates in and then basically says, I've examined them all. They seem right and proper. I'm going to put the rolls together for the names of the people that I will direct the Capitol Police under the command of the Sergeant at Arms, whose term likewise continues. These are the people that your security should let through, not only into the building, but onto the floor of the House. If your name's not on the list, just like trying to get into a nightclub, what's going to happen? You're going to argue, you're going to fight, you're going to pull out documentation, you're going to point to things, you're going to point to news reports on your phone. See, I'm this guy. Here's my ID. Here's my certificate of election. Let me in. The question is, will they do it? I mean, will they say your ID looks fake like they do to tribal members in, well, anywhere that they encounter them? It would be crazy. It would be war. It would be problematic. It would be unconstitutional. It would be the end of the republic. And people were arguing with me. Yeah, but at that point, you're talking about the end of the republic. Yup. Aren't you worried about that happening right now? Through all the other circumstances you're observing in the news? You should be. I mean, do you say this about Greenland? Well, if they invade Greenland, that's the end of NATO. Yeah, it is the end of NATO. Yeah, you're right. I mean, just because that sounds insane and we shouldn't be doing it doesn't mean they aren't going to try to do that. Realistically, again, back to this, is the clerk going to do this? There's no indication that this is the kind of person who's in the clerk's office right now. None. That doesn't mean they can't replace him. That doesn't mean he can't be stealthily waiting for this opportunity. That doesn't necessarily mean this whole thing is a waste of time or isn't a waste of time. And we shouldn't be talking about it because he's never going to do it. And you'll see on January 3rd. That's the most likely outcome. But if you're going to say, this is how it works, and I encourage you to do some reading, this is the reading you should be doing. Anyway, and it brought to mind, as he was saying, there's no way, there's just no mechanism for Trump to cancel the elections because they're controlled by states. I would also point out that there's something else that at the moment is in the control of the states, and quote unquote, everybody knows it's in control of the states. And yet Trump is trying mightily to interfere, and he's making headway. Hasn't won the case yet, hasn't done the thing, hasn't accomplished the goal. But the people who are in control of this mechanism, this next mechanism I'm going to talk about in a second, are state officials, and only state officials, and in this case, a Democratic state official who nonetheless is making headlines for some strange reason about pondering doing Trump's bidding on this anyway, even though it's not in Trump's power to do it, and everybody would tell a Democratic politician at this point, therefore don't do it. Is still saying, well, I don't think I'm gonna, but I might. I mean, there's reason to think about it. What are we talking about? If there's just no mechanism for Trump to do that thing because it's clearly in state hands, what is Jared Polis doing publicly musing about clemency for Tina Peters? Is he serious? I don't know. I doubt it. There are certainly some people who are saying, well, he's just saying, well, and he does. I mean, what his version of it is, well, maybe 9 years in the clink is too much for Tina Peters. After all, she's quote unquote elderly. You know, she'd argue with you in any other setting, but if it gets her out of jail, I'm elderly. All right. So, but there's no reason. Everybody knows he doesn't have to do this. But Trump is finding mechanisms to make him say, well, maybe, and his excuse again is maybe 9 years was too much. Maybe it should be 7 years. I might knock 2 years off her sentence, which might not make any material difference, especially if she really is elderly, whatever that means. But the answer should be, yeah, I'll let you know. I'll call you rather than you call me about clemency for Tina Peters. If it occurs to me that there's a reason to do it, you'll find out when it happens, because this is in state hands. Period. End of sentence. You can't cancel the elections. They're in state hands unless, for some strange reason, Democratic governors start saying, well, maybe it would be fairest to cancel the elections. Why? Why on earth would they do that? I don't know. Why on earth would Jared Polis consider doing this? By the way, he shouldn't. And that's the opinion. Well, so say we all, really. But it's the opinion of opinion columnist, and they say it like 19 times in the headline here, of Max Potter. Oops, I'm going to have to reload this thing. Max Potter and please let me scroll down and credit shoot. I'm going to have to read it to you from Instapaper. And are they going to give it? No, they just credit Max Potter. There's another one on record here. And I think, by the way, you should program your paywall pop-up not to block the names of your authors. The Writers Guild Union there should insist that be the case on every website. I will try one more time to see whether I can scroll down and get you the name. Tremitiere. Oh my gosh. Of course it had to be one that was difficult. Tremitiere. Oh, and the pop-up isn't coming up. Maybe they heard me. Okay. Guest commentary on them on the question of clemency for Tina Peters, which they say endangers us all. How do you like that? And how do you like the fact that it's now 9:58 and I only have 30 seconds to give you a taste of what's going on here? Why not? We'll do it and then play the music. Get out of here. I think we all understand, though, the argument they're making. Last week, when Governor Jared Polis said he was considering clemency for Tina Peters, the former Mesa County clerk, you know who she is, serving 9 years. Well, the governor's benevolent instincts here about whether or not it was just too long of a sentence tells us what? The governor's benevolent instincts are laudable, but leniency here would only invite more lawbreaking and ultimately more suffering in Colorado and beyond. Beyond. Okay, well, the button is properly pressed, although apparently the pause button was on, so we're 3 seconds late with the music. So I'll stop talking now so the editing is easier. All right, welcome back, everyone, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. You know, as I'm glancing over the opinion piece that I was looking about clemency for Tina Peters, I mean, I think the argument is kind of easily summarized. Basically, they did it right there, right? If you pardon her or reduce the sentence, leniency here would only invite more lawbreaking and ultimately more suffering. Like, remember what her crime is here. She believes a wackadoodle theory about the elections in 2020 being stolen by hacked voting machines, and she uses her position to to violate the very terms of her position. She's the one who's supposed to administer the elections and administer the election equipment and make sure that no one tampers with the election equipment. And she said, I'm going to sneak some people in to tamper with election equipment because I think it will prove my wackadoodle theory, which, you know, I mean, I guess you could say, well, if she really and truly believes that the presidency of the United States has been stolen, well, you know, I mean, I am sympathetic to the idea that you really believe this, but it's just not plausible and real. And you, in particular, are not supposed to be sneaking people in to validate your pet theories, no matter how important you think the outcome of that theory might be. But anyway, I guess it's not that long of an article, and for some reason I'm past the paywall now. So that's interesting all by itself. And now I guess I'll read you a little bit more. Maybe the Denver Post finally felt me complaining about how much they spam me and how they how their unsubscribe button doesn't work. And this is the make good. So Peters, by the way, 70 years old, like these days getting outside the realm of, you know, calling people elderly. I mean, you know, there's active people way older than that. My parents are 10 years older than that. And, you know, all right. I mean, I guess it's still fair to say, well, you know, 80 is, I guess, you know, technically you got to be on the lookout for people using that term, even if you don't feel that way. But anyway, 70 years old is now, if you want, you can run around saying, I'm still young-ish. I'm young at heart. But if you're in prison, I'm elderly. Okay, we understand. There's lots of things that work that way. Peters, who is 70 years old, is a cause célèbre among those who insist that the 2020 election was stolen. President Donald Trump performatively issued her a, quote, full pardon, but it has no legal effect because Peters was convicted under state law. Not only has Trump repeatedly attacked the governor on social media for failing to intervene on Peters' behalf, but he's also vetoed bipartisan legislation and tried to withhold billions of dollars in funding for Colorado's neediest families for clean water and disaster relief. I mean, it sucks. He's putting a lot of pressure on it. He shouldn't be able to do that. That's illegal. It'll take you a long time to stake your claim and vindicate it, though. And he knows that. And in the meantime, you're going to go without money. Eventually you'll win, maybe, kind of, sort of. And then at what point he will appeal and ignore the ruling and try to impeach the judges who ruled against him. But in the meantime, he's screwing you over. Are there mechanisms to make people do this? I don't know, but it seems to be catching Jared Polis's attention. Amidst this relentless pressure campaign, the governor recently expressed his view that Peters, quote, got a sentence that was harsh, ellipsis. And when you have people that are elderly, and we're looking at this across a number of many people in their 70s and 80s in our system, how much of a threat to society are they? And how do we balance that in a way that makes sure that they can spend their last few years at home? Why should they spend their last few years at home? I don't know exactly, but I guess there's some compassionate cases in which you might think that they've served 50 plus years. Theirs was a violent crime, perhaps, and now they are elderly, frail, not capable of committing the same kind of violence. But hers isn't a violent crime. Her crime is a desk job. I sneak somebody else in to do the physical work of, breaking into an office and carrying some things away. And it wasn't even heavy physical work. They were taking some internal machinery, some chips, microchips, quote unquote, breaking into an office with a key. Wow, gee whiz. I mean, come on. Is somebody who's 70 years old capable of putting a key in a lock and allowing someone else to carry some items out? Yeah, I think she could probably recreate that crime even at the ancient age of 70, gee whiz. I mean, that's just not applicable. Amidst this relentless pressure campaign, right, we now have Jared Polis pondering this nonsense. The governor is right to examine whether elderly inmates in our state prisons pose a continuing threat to society. I mean, okay, let's examine that. Does she pose a continuing threat to society? What was her threat? Tampering with election machines. Can she do it at age 70? Yes. Is she still a threat? Yep. Does fairness require that we give her another chance to do it? No. So anyway, the governor, though, is right to examine whether elderly inmates are being treated unfairly. The governor is likewise justified in exploring a range of options for ensuring Colorado receives the funding it needs. But here, such altruistic considerations do not justify capitulating to a lawless authoritarian in the White House. The courts are already stepping in, freezing the president's attempt to withhold funds for childcare, food assistance, housing, job training. And despite stark polarization, it's clear there's real bipartisan alignment within the state's delegation to keep fighting in Congress for other critical state priorities, that water bill, for instance. Even if clemency led the White House to dial back on the ongoing efforts to punish Colorado, acquiescence today only invites future harassment. Bending to the demands of a bully does not earn goodwill. It signals that extortion and coercion are likely to pay off again. Accommodation on points of principle, justice, the rule of law, truth itself, little points, send a troubling signal that if enough pressure is applied, anything is up for negotiation. Jamel, anything. Why would a Democrat? I don't know. Why is a Democrat? Well, but he didn't. Not yet. He didn't. But I mean, if your question is cancel the elections, don't we have until November to see whether it happens or not? You say it didn't, can't, won't. I say it ain't November yet. I mean, I think you're right. He won't. But I only think so. And then you were the one that brought up mechanics. But you got the mechanics wrong. So, should be open for discussion. Anyway, Where were we here? Right. Anything's up for negotiation if you do this. Moreover, clemency for Peters would do incalculable damage to our state and our nation. Peters has never repented for her crimes, never conceded the legitimacy of the 2020 election, or apologized for the untold harm she caused to fellow election officials. Clemency would open the door for more lawbreaking, inspire further attacks on the integrity of our elections, and foment deeper divisions in our state. And I don't think they make the case entirely clearly here. Let me embellish. This might be what they're after here. But even if it isn't, I want to add this. That's an interesting point. Untold harm she caused to fellow elections officials. Clemency would open the door to more lawbreaking. Put those two things together. If you pardon or issue clemency in some way for Tina Peters, and the message goes out, this could happen for you too if you also break the law this way, but maybe only if you're elderly. I'm not sure. Untold harm to other elections officials. Suppose you are an honest elections official administering your charge correctly, honestly, and truthfully. And maybe you're a Republican, maybe you're not. But local Republicans will hear, hey, it's not a crime to do this anymore, so why don't you let me into your county's election machine so I can make off with the internal mechanisms and check it for fraud? No, I can't do that. It's against the law. No, it isn't. Tina Peters just did it, and she's happily walking the street. She's just having a party over in Mesa County right now. So how about we say this? If you're too cowardly to do what is obviously now legal, I'll kill you. Well, that's still illegal, supposedly, though people who said we should kill the vice president seem to not be in much trouble either. So maybe it's not. Will they be wrong? Will they be morally wrong? Yes. Will they be encouraged by the fact that somebody else has been morally wrong in letting Tina Peters go? Yep, they will. Untold harm to other fellow elections officials who will now come under pressure, death threats, to do what Tina Peters did or else. Because what's your problem? It's not even illegal anymore. Trump has already shown by pardoning January 6th rioters, to return to the article, that he can protect allies who break the law on his behalf from federal law enforcement. But state law and the prospect of serious criminal penalties for serious criminal behavior remains an essential deterrent. If Trump can demonstrate in such a high-profile way that he can also protect his apparatchiks from state law consequences, even in a state under the stewardship of a principled, independent governor, it will be a ringing invitation to his allies to break the law on his behalf when it comes to the upcoming elections here and around the country. I can't believe it. How dare they? Don't you know the mechanics? I encourage you to do some reading. And here's the thing. Peters is up for parole consideration in 2028. The legal system will work on its own as it does for any other ordinary person. The parole board would undoubtedly consider and give great weight to the governor's humanitarian concerns then. But you should change your position on that. Regardless of Governor Polis's best intentions and just motives, gubernatorial clemency would be proof that you can break the law and get away with it as long as you do it for Donald Trump. Thank you very much. Well done. Who are these people, by the way? Who are these people? Max Potter was the senior media advisor to former Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper and is now a writer-editor with Protect Democracy. And everybody likes the sound of that. Beau Tremitiere, oh my goodness, Tremi, Tremitiere, yeah, okay, Tremitiere, resides in Boulder County and is a counsel at Protect Democracy, where he leads programs to defend the rule of law. All very good sounding. Very nice. So, by the way, Tina Peters and this weird theory about the elections being stolen through voting machines. You've heard it before. You know where it comes from. You know what it's of, right? I had a correspondence about that I thought I would share with you. You may recognize it as, of course, that's the core of the accusations that the wackadoodles make against Dominion voting systems. And Dominion voting system has clobbered them in court for millions of dollars every time they do this stupid thing. Well, I don't know, not every time, but one of the times. And they won, what was it, like $75 million settlement. Fox News had to, recant some of its its statements, etc. And since then, they've been a little bit gun shy, let's say. But not everybody has been gun shy. But you remember this started with or came through Sidney Powell. And there was that moment right in the middle, actually in the lead up prior to January 6th. They were having crazy ass meetings in the Oval Office, and where people in the White House staff were like, please throw this idiot Sidney Powell out of here. We can't have Mike Flynn, pillow guy, overstock.com guy, Sidney Powell in here spewing this nonsense. Enough with this. But there was a time apparently in which Trump is considering, I'm going to appoint her special counsel to investigate this, and even if my term ends in a few days, they can't fire the special counsel without looking like hypocrites. She's going to create havoc inside the federal government, quote unquote, investigating this theory. But apparently this theory has been tremendously whitewashed, tremendously sane-washed, and it's still crazy. Everybody knows it's insane, and bits of pieces of it have leaked through. Remember, Sidney Powell was emailing people, the Italians are using their military satellites to, and that all this is being hacked by Hugo Chavez, who's been dead since whenever, 2013, I think. And, well, the rest of the Nicaraguan, I keep mistaking this Nicaragua for Venezuela. Gee whiz, I don't know why. It's only so similar in terms of our intervention there. But okay, the Venezuelan government is still doing it. And so maybe it was Nicolas Maduro who's doing it. And so maybe we should invade and arrest him. They didn't really get around to that point. But now it seems like a continuation of it. Trump's got his brain poisoned about Venezuela a long time ago. And that's all well and good. And sounds ridiculous and stupid and tinfoil hat stuff, and everybody can tell. But there's more. And I didn't think I even realized this until I got a message in email the other day from frequent correspondent David Paquette, who do I pronounce it correctly? I think we've done it before. I mean, made mention of your great support for the show, plus a few dispatches you sent our way. And it's Paquette. Do I pronounce that with the emphasis on the second syllable? I hope so. I didn't do it the first time. But he's asked the question, essentially, do you know how crazy this thing actually is? Very few newspaper reports that even mention, when they are saying that this is a wackadoodle theory, tell you how wackadoodle it really is. And he just proceeded to recite it to us more or less from memory about it in this email to us, the Dominion delusion. And that one tiny detail gets, is incorrectly stated, but you'll see it's like, well, forgivable in terms of the terminology you use, because it's just one fantasy versus another one. None of the things happen. But I hadn't realized how crazy it was. And so I went out and I did go and find, there are some, mainstream media outlets that actually did cover this and put it in there. But it's weird how it doesn't get included all the time. So how crazy is it? If you're going to consider clemency for Tina Peters, I want you to know what theory she was working under. And you tell me whether it's good politics to pardon this. So David says, I'm not sure why no one ever includes a key piece of background information on the Trump campaign's obsession with Dominion voting systems after the 2020 election. Among the Dominion versus Fox News discovery materials, there was an email that Sidney Powell forwarded to Fox. Fox hosts had asked Powell to share her source for accusing Dominion of fraud and conspiracy. I believe the email she sent in response was almost Dominion's entire case against Fox and the reason Fox settled. Now he gives us his description of it, and I'm giving it to you as he wrote it, and I'll note where there was a slight change. I'm giving it to you as he wrote it because then when I went and said, let me look at some articles about it, that's right. This is summarized correctly. The original email sent from conservative Minnesotan, by the way, Minnesotan cactus artist, and I don't know if I've run into any other articles that say, she identifies as a cactus artist, and I don't know what that would be. And I don't know how you do it in Minnesota. But, indoor cactuses, I guess. Anyway, the original email sent from conservative Minnesotan cactus artist Marlene Bourne, like the Bourne conspiracy or whatever, right? Spelled the same way. Sent to Powell, detailed the so-called evidence that the Trump campaign endlessly repeated in the media. But there's more. In the email, Bourne admitted that she knew no one associated with Dominion, nor anyone who could know anything factual about Dominion. But instead of an actual human source, she explained to Powell, she had been, and here's the quibble over the terminology, she had been, quote, partially decapitated in a dream. Now, after having done the research, it actually reads, I was internally decapitated in a dream, which I think I can forgive you the discrepancy. Neither one of them make any sense. But again, in a dream. So I was partially / internally decapitated in a dream. Interesting, but so the F what? You happened to you in a dream? Okay, please tell me more. Make this make sense. Go on. Well, I was partially decapitated in a dream some years earlier, which, quote, caused her to become psychic, unquote. Since then, Bourne wrote, she has frequently received important messages via, quote, voices that she hears when the wind blows. And boy, does this whole story blow. This included all the, quote, information about Dominion. So the Fox people all knew for a fact, as does Trump, that Powell's ultimate source was the auditory hallucinations of a tragically deluded woman. Because of this email, it was clear in their internal text messages that the Fox hosts thought that Powell and Giuliani's claims were completely ridiculous, but none of them challenged them about it on the air. In fact, Maria Bartiromo actually quoted the Bourne email during a Powell interview, untruly accusing Paul Pelosi, along the way, of being a major Dominion investor, which Powell, quote, confirmed in her response. Those hallucinations continue to be the ultimate source of Trump's opinion of Dominion. Oh, that rhymes. Other than his conviction that every single vote against him, of course, is fraudulent. Well, wow. I don't believe I had ever really heard that spelled out. And, I asked him, have you got any links to any of this? And there's Politico has got it. NPR has got it. Are they both from 2023? Yes. April of 2023 is the NPR story. Although, again, the focus of the story there is whether or not Fox was going to lose their case. And then a November 2023 Politico article that I guess is entitled Tons of Crazy. That's in scare quotes. Tons of Crazy, the inside story of how Fox fell for the big lie. A play-by-play from Inside Fox reveals how the network poisoned politics and lost, I think I might have had in my head that it was $75 million, $787.5 million. It was a major judgment. This article might be a little longer than the one I want to read here, but it was Brian Stetler putting that together. So Politico does know that that's what underlies all of this. And you should be aware that we're really talking about Trump maybe possibly being able to paint Jared Polis into a corner such that he ends up pardoning or granting clemency to the woman who broke into the Mesa County voting machines to, quote unquote, prove the theory of the partially decapitated woman's dream, whatever the hell, or the dream in which the woman's partially decapitated and became psychic and hears on the wind that Dominion voting machines are being hacked by Italian military satellites and the Venezuelan government. That's what's happening here. We're having to hopefully dismiss the rumors that Polis is really considering this in real life. But how are those elections going to go? Man, I can't tell you. I do not know. There's no way to predict in an atmosphere like this. So I gathered up a story about that somewhere, and I'll share his the links that David sent along with the links that I put somewhere, because it's going to take me a long time to find the thing at this point, though I know it's in Instapaper. And, it's basically going to lay out, like I said, what I told you David said. So we'll do it this way. I think he's recounted it faithfully. Here it is. From the Minnesota Post, The Bourne Conspiracy, how a Minnesotan's email became key evidence in Fox News Dominion voting systems lawsuit. So, it exists, and we'll just use that, those 3 links as proof that I'm not just making this up, and neither is David. This is a March of 2023 article. So, throughout 2023, from time to time, when they're covering the context of the Fox News Dominion voting systems lawsuit, they are bringing this up. And then it's just not added as context when we talk about Tina Peters and clemency anymore. And it should be. It's that crazy. This person might have to, even if there's clemency and you let her out of prison, she needs to go to a mental institution. But don't bother. She's not in a maximum security prison as it is. Everything's fine. Leave her where she is. Okay. Other things. I'll just move on to some other things, because as I'm scrolling through Instapaper, I'm like, oh yeah, that's important. Oh gosh, that's important. Oh, and I didn't get to that, and that's important. So many things. Let me go back up and scroll through backwards again so I can find this thing. This, I think, is an important bit of news that we can fit in before the break. Total shift of gears, but belongs as a part of the overall picture of what's happening in this country. The Pentagon, boo. The Pentagon says a thing that a pop-up ad has blocked. Ah, yes, here it is. Pentagon says it will refocus, that's quote, refocus Stars and Stripes content. Well, you all know about Stars and Stripes. We cite it once in a while, and Darwin brings it up fairly frequently as a source of his when he's doing some senior military reporting. And where am I finding this report that the Pentagon says it will refocus Stars and Stripes content? Well, for the time being, Stars and Stripes. And I think Corey Dickstein is a writer we've read before from Stars and Stripes. He's on this beat. I guess basically anything that we think is important enough to pull out of military reporting is likely to come from him. But here's the story. The Pentagon said, and this may be the last gasp in which they're able to do this. The Pentagon said on social media Thursday it would take over editorial content decision-making for Stars and Stripes in a statement from the Defense Department's top spokesman. And I can see where they think this makes sense in the Trump White House and the Trump Pentagon. We're paying for it. Why don't we control it? Well, to maintain credibility, you let it be an independent voice. But if you're not interested in credibility, I guess it doesn't matter. Quote, the Department of War is returning Stars and Stripes to its original mission, reporting for our warfighters. It's not strayed from that mission. We are bringing Stars and Stripes into the 21st century. Sean Parnell, the Pentagon's top public affairs official and a close advisor to Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, I guess, or Hegseth, wrote in a statement posted to X. So may or may not be real. We will modernize its operations, refocus its content away from woke distractions that siphon morale, and adapt it to serve a new generation of service members, crazy ones, who don't care about truth. The statement appears to challenge the editorial independence of Stars and Stripes, which, while a part of the Pentagon's defense media activity, as they call it, has long retained independence from editorial oversight from the Pentagon under a congressional mandate that it be governed by First Amendment principles. After all, if you're out there fighting for First Amendment principles and every other constitutional principle, then it makes sense to live by them. Or it did at one point, anyway. The move was met with pushback from several Democratic senators who accused the Pentagon of tampering with the newspaper's reporting, which they might very well try to do. Stars and Stripes, which is dedicated to serving U.S. government personnel overseas, seeks to emulate the best practices of commercial news organizations in the United States. And, this would be one of them. It is governed by the Defense Department Directive 5122 dot point, I don't know how you say it, Directive 5122.11. The directive states, among other provisions, that there shall be a free flow of news and information to its readership without news management or censorship. Oh, okay. Editor-in-Chief Eric Slavin, in a note to Stars and Stripes editorial staff across the globe Thursday, said the military deserves independent news. And don't they? I don't understand why the Hegseth Pentagon won't give the troops what they deserve. Hi, everybody. It's me, David, still your host for the Kagro in the Morning Show after all these years. Thank you for all your continuing support for the show. And if you're listening regularly and still thinking about getting on board as a supporter, well, the time is now. Patreon.com is the easiest way to make recurring subscription-style payments every month, all year round, to keep us going. patreon.com/KagroX brings you to our page where you can sign up with your monthly support. And hey, have you seen our clever new subscription tiers? It's easier than ever to sign up for, say, one crisp dollar bill for every information-packed 2-hour show. If you're the plan ahead type, there's even a year-long subscription program that saves you 15% on the cover price. Or it would if there was a cover price, or even a cover, for that matter. patreon.com/KAGROX. Thanks again for all your support. All right. Hey, welcome back, everybody. Just low-key, taking care of some other business while running the show here. But welcome back. Let's use this last segment to get through the rest. I feel like it's a longer article than just this. But I think we really got to give Stars and Stripes their due on this one. We left off by noting that the editor-in-chief communicated with staff globally and said, look, the military deserves independent news. And they do. And normally, Hegseth and the others are the first ones to say what the troops deserve. But, you know, hypocrisy and all that stuff. Whatever. The people who risk their lives in defense of the Constitution have earned the right to press freedoms of the First Amendment, Slavin wrote. We will not compromise on serving them with accurate and balanced coverage, holding military officials to account when called for. Stars and Stripes first appeared during the Civil War, and it has been continuously published since World War II. It is staffed by civilian and active duty U.S. military reporters and editors who produce daily newspapers for American troops around the world and a website, stripes.com. I'm reading it right now, which is updated with news 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You know, like regular people get. Parnell said Thursday that the military newspaper would now, quote, be custom tailored to our warfighter, with a focus on, quote, warfighting, weapon systems, fitness, lethality, survivability, and, now in all caps, all things military, like military policy, or what the hell are we doing, or what might be of interest outside of lifting weights to somebody who's in the military. Nope, none of that. In other words, it's Pete Hegseth's fantasy about what military stuff is, rather than the reality of what it is to be in the military in the 21st century. Anyway, he said Stars and Stripes would no longer post repurposed DC gossip columns or Associated Press reprints. Not going to have any of that. Hegseth reposted Parnell's statement. Jacqueline Smith, Stars and Stripes ombudsman, said Thursday that in her 2 years in the role, she has found the news organization has remained focused on the U.S. military. And of course it is. It's just reporting the reality of the world in and around the U.S. military. And Hegseth wants it to be about, you know, let's lift weights and end the war on protein and go to, you know, my church or who knows what and get tattoos. That's what the warfighters want. I can say with assurance that Stripes does focus on warfighters, quote, she says, quote, it's in scare quotes, warfighters in every aspect that affects them and their families. She said they take it seriously. They just also know that people want real news. Even warfighters. How are we doing in the war? Do you care? Maybe. Spokespersons for Hegseth's office declined to provide additional comment or detail about Parnell's statement Thursday. A White House spokesperson referred questions about the Pentagon's plan for Stars and Stripes to comments published in a story by the Daily Wire, which is maybe not where you want to go on this stuff. One of the crazy-ass right-wing publications. The Department of War, under the leadership of President Trump and Secretary Hegseth, is continuing to revitalize, restore, and modernize, the White House Deputy Press Secretary Anna Kelly said, according to that stupid Daily Wire. Stars and Stripes is just the latest example of a broader effort to adapt long-standing institutions to how today's service members live, work, and consume information. Or how we think they should, anyway. The Pentagon plans for active duty service members to produce all of Stars and Stripes content moving forward, according to the Daily Wire, citing unnamed defense officials. It's supposed to be war officials, damn it. Anyway, but not in Stars and Stripes. They did it right. 50% of the content of its website would, quote, be composed of War Department-generated materials, including digital or print materials made by War Department writers and images captured by combat cameras, the organization reported. Smith said such changes would amount to unnecessary control and the perception of propaganda. It would. That is public relations, not independent journalism, she said. The other 50% of the content would also hold no credibility. So, there you go. Senator Ruben Gallego of Arizona, a Marine Corps veteran himself, who in November co-sponsored a resolution recognizing Stars and Stripes, again voiced his opposition on Thursday. Like thousands of service members and veterans, I read Stars and Stripes when I was in Iraq. Stars and Stripes' independence is exactly why troops trust it. And the Pentagon's attempt to take over its editorial decisions undermines that trust. I'll fight any attempt to turn Stars and Stripes into another mouthpiece for this administration's propaganda. Parnell's post came a day after a Washington Post reporter, a different use of the word post, revealed that applicants for positions at Stars and Stripes were being asked how they would support President Donald Trump's policies. The questionnaire appears on the USA Jobs portal, an official website for federal hiring. Stars and Stripes was unaware of the questions until the Post inquired about them, organization leaders said. Interesting. The Pentagon statement comes several years after the Defense Department attempted to shut down Stars and Stripes in 2020. Guess when that happened, or who was president then? During, of course, Trump's first administration. The Pentagon asked Congress then to cut funding for the publication, which is about 50% funded by tax dollars and 50% funded by advertising and subscription sales, before ordering it closed. Wow, I don't think I even knew that. DOD ultimately shifted course after bipartisan lawmakers vowed to support the organization, and Trump announced Stars and Stripes would remain in operation and continue to be a wonderful source of information to our great military. The Pentagon does not appear to be considering shutting the publication down. Stars and Stripes has had a proud legacy of reporting news that's important to our service members, Parnell wrote in his statement. The Department of War is committed to ensuring the outlet continues to reflect that proud legacy. Democrats on the Senate Armed Services Committee on Thursday said any efforts to change Stars and Stripes' editorial independence amounted to an attack on the First Amendment. Senators Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts, of course, Mark Kelly of Arizona, Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut, and Tammy Duckworth of Illinois, all members of that committee, voiced support for Stars and Stripes' editorial independence. Stars and Stripes reached out to several Republican lawmakers, but none immediately responded to requests for comment. What, they did not respond to our troops? Why didn't they? I salute when I say troops. Blumenthal called the move a disrespect to our military men and women. And my saluting is disrespect to the Republicans who only mouth respect for our military men and women. I certainly will push back because I think that the independence of Stars and Stripes is absolutely essential to the public knowing the truth about what's happening in our military, and also a measure of respect to our men and women who serve and sacrifice, added Blumenthal, a Marine Corps veteran. And you know how many times Trump has denigrated his service. Kelly, a Navy veteran, said the effort was an attack on the free press, and of course they're attacking him as well, trying to demote him for having the temerity to say that members of the military should not follow illegal commands. And by the way, I understand that the that several other members of Congress who participated in disseminating that same message and video have been served with subpoenas declaring that they are now under investigation. But Kelly is also under threat of demotion in his retired status. Anyway, he goes on to say in conclusion to this article, I still read Stars and Stripes today. I read it in the 1980s, and it is important that members of the military get uninfluenced and unfiltered news, Kelly said. It's very disappointing. It's also not unexpected. And I guess that's probably true. It was probably just a matter of time with Trump and Trump Republicans in charge. Okay. In other news, in legislative news, I should update you on this. Of course, we all know the story that the House recently passed by way of discharge petition under the leadership of Hakeem Jeffries, the 3-year extension of ACA subsidies that would allow people to continue with their benefits affordably. And of course, lots of people expressed, probably correctly, their doubts about whether or not the Senate would likewise pass such a thing. It doesn't mean it's dead. It doesn't mean that they would necessarily not be able to pass something, but it's now looking more and more like that will end up being the outcome. Senate ACA funding talks fizzle as higher premiums for millions take effect for 2026. According to NBC News, negotiations to revive Obamacare funds have stalled, with optimism fading as open enrollment ends. Most Republicans want the funds to stay expired, and I guess they will, while the Senate disappears for another 10 days starting now. Sahil Kapoor and Katie Taylor are the familiar reporters on this piece. Senate negotiations aimed at striking a bipartisan deal to revive expired funds under the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, have fizzled, according to senators involved and sources with knowledge of the discussions. The odds of a deal have been slim for months. Now, on the day that ACA open enrollment ends, even the optimists have grown pessimistic as the working group falls behind its self-imposed timeline. The Senate left town Thursday for a 1-week recess. Democrats are unified behind a 3-year ACA funding extension, which passed the House recently with 230 votes, including 17 Republicans. Trump has threatened to veto that bill, instead releasing a health care blueprint, apparently, that trashes the ACA funds as a flagrant scam and conveys his opposition to reviving the expired tax credits. Most Republicans want the funds to stay expired and have made clear for months that they don't want to resurrect them. A small group of GOP senators has engaged in talks with moderate Democrats about a compromise, but conservative demands to tie any deal to abortion restrictions have become intractable, said one source plugged into the talks. Senator Bernie Moreno of Ohio, Republican, who has been part of the talks and spoken optimistically about the prospects, told NBC News on Tuesday that the group will hopefully reach a deal and release, quote, a tentative thing soonish. Well, okay. Can't blame them for that. But on Thursday, that bullishness faded. Moreno said it's the fault of Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, saying he must, quote, go out publicly and endorse the group's emerging framework, which includes a 2-year ACA funding extension with income limits and a $5 per month minimum payment. But the group has failed to reach agreement on 2 of the biggest sticking points, including Trump's call to move money out of the ACA system and toward health savings accounts, or what I would call so-called health savings accounts, and Republican demands for stricter Hyde Amendment language or abortion restrictions tied to any deal. And I mean, come on. It's been strict enough for decades. Would you encourage your conference to negotiate with Republicans to pass a 2-year extension with the reforms that have been outlined? It's a simple yes or no, Moreno said of Schumer. Right now, it seems like no. Well, because they want 3 years. So why would we waste time and effort? But Schumer has not discouraged his members from pursuing a compromise with the Republicans. Sources close to 2 of the Dem senators involved in the discussions said. And I mean, I think we've all seen that. Absolutely not, said one of the sources. The second source said Moreno appeared to be trying to deflect from his own party's widespread opposition to continuing the ACA money. The source added, that Trump's suggestion for Republicans is to be flexible on abortion. And that hurt negotiations by sparking a backlash from anti-abortion rights advocates and made GOP senators even more spooked about cutting a deal. Schumer said in a statement to NBC News, everyone knows Democrats have been trying to negotiate a deal to extend ACA tax credits since the summer. Senator Moreno is trying to distract from the reality the credits expired and Americans are paying thousands more because Republicans can't get their act together. Schumer's office said the minority leader met with Trump on Thursday at the White House. Among other topics of discussion, Schumer raised the need for President Trump to push Senate Republicans to support the 3-year extension that has already passed the House. His office said. Apart from Schumer, many Republicans remain skeptical of a bipartisan deal to renew ACA subsidies. Senate Majority Leader John Thune of South Dakota has not endorsed any proposal to extend ACA funds and voted against the House-backed 3-year extension. Earlier this week, he criticized the enhanced ACA funds, which he noted were first passed as part of a COVID relief package under President Biden. There's waste, fraud, and abuse in Obamacare, Thune said on Tuesday on the Senate floor, and it seems that the Biden COVID subsidies were especially susceptible to fraud. How so? Can't tell you because his statement and the article end there. And I don't think he could tell you even if you saw him in person. So that's where that stands. Important, I guess. I mean, it is. I don't know whether it's going to seem important going into this next chaotic weekend, but hey, what can you do? All we can do is prepare you for it. Now, man, there's just really so many things to get to that I don't know. But let's try and inform you on a couple other things that will crop up. Semaphore did some reporting the other day, which I put aside and didn't get to. But at this point, we'll just go with an interpretive spin on their reporting from the Bulwark. Jonathan V. Last, he says he wants to have the V in there. Which will cover the same ground, I think, and put probably an additional gloss on it that I think will be useful in interpreting what's going on. His piece entitled, How Trump Turned a Foreign Country, it's Venezuela, into a piggy bank, although he may also mean Qatar. I'm not sure which one of these is the piggy bank. Let's see. He starts off with some other stuff because he's doing the morning update on the day I grabbed this from. So let me skip down a little bit to this one. Here we are, the first of his items from date January 15th. That's yesterday. Item number 1 on the agenda here. 1, lies we tell ourselves. Great news. Yesterday, President Trump spoke to the current unelected dictator in charge of Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez. You may recall, and remember where this is coming from, the Bulwark, so Republican perspective. Anyway, you may recall that Rodriguez is a socialist revolutionary who was Nicolas Maduro's partner in crime. Having just installed her as Madam Presidente, Trump called her a, quote, terrific person and said that his partnership with Venezuela, quote, will be a spectacular one. By the way, side note, yesterday, another thing that Trump has no power to do, but somehow suddenly did, he managed to get his hands on that Nobel Prize medal from Maria, is it Machado, who actually won it, maybe shouldn't have, but she knuckled under and brought it over and handed it over to him and was proud to do so, probably in the hopes that she would get installed as president of Venezuela once she made him happy. Anyway, back to the article. I know what you're thinking. How is this possible? What about freedom for the Venezuelan people? What about the evils of socialism? What is Trump's angle? Well, there are 2 answers to that. The first is Trump's personal angle. This week, the U.S. government made its first sale of Venezuelan oil and pocketed $500 million. And by the way, I'm not positive that's the stage we're at. That's the stage they claimed they were at or getting to. But it was unclear to me from the initial reporting whether we've seized oil that we think we can sell for $500 billion or $1 million or not. Not sure. But anyway, let's see what they have to say here. They say they made their first sale, pocketed $500 million. Would you like to know where that money is being held? Because, it's not the Treasury, which is what you probably would have thought initially if you had to guess. but it ain't. It's in Qatar, in accounts, in a bank in Qatar. Why Qatar? For starters, because government accounts in Qatar are controlled by the executive branch and not Congress. Trump is continuing to create his own funding stream for the government that can operate independently of congressional approval or oversight. He is severing the linkage between the legislature and the purse and attempting to concentrate access to capital in the hands of the executive. You know, like a king. I don't know how much difference 500 million is going to do in terms of the budget, but okay. Another reason that he's trying to place these monies beyond the reach of creditors. I flubbed that a little bit, but that's a reason why he's doing it, to put the money beyond the reach of creditors. Venezuela owes tens of billions of dollars to various companies and countries. Trump's position is that since he has a navy, none of those creditors can make claims on the money that he's now extracting from Venezuela. It belongs to him. Trump said this explicitly last week when the CEO of ConocoPhillips, Ryan Lance, said that his company was the largest non-sovereign credit holder in Venezuela. It hoped to recoup some of its claims. Trump responded, "We're not going to look at what people lost in the past because that was their fault." Remember, by the way, like 2 seconds before that, well, we invaded because they stole all this stuff from American companies and we're going to get it back. All right, now that you got it back, can we have it? No, because I want it. And it's your fault that you lost it. How is it your fault? I don't know. So, Trump is putting his America's money in Qatar, where courts can't touch it. Kind of like a drug dealer stashing his funds in the Caymans. Which brings us to the second payoff. Nicolas Maduro had close ties to Cuba dating back to his early entry into revolutionary politics. He remained tied to the Cuban regime the entire time, so close that his personal bodyguards were provided by the Cuban government. Maduro was seen as more loyal to Havana than anyone else in Hugo Chávez's inner circle, which was a big part of why Chávez, also a Castro-Cuba guy, chose him as a successor. Delcy Rodriguez is no fool. She understands that America's invasion was driven by Marco Rubio and that Rubio cares above all about Cuba. She surely sees that ties to Havana are now a liability. And after the invasion and kidnapping of Maduro, she sees that the support Cuba provided was worthless. And so she understands that she can buy off the two stakeholders in the U.S. government pretty easily. By cutting ties to Cuba, she gives Rubio what he wants, and by giving away Venezuelan oil, she gives Trump what he wants. With her two masters sated, she is well positioned to retain power because she is useful to them. It is not an accident, by the way, that Trump spoke with and endorsed Rodriguez yesterday before his meeting with Maria Corina Machado today. That is to say now yesterday. The people pushing Democratic claims on power can suck it. That's not what this adventure was about. There's a little more here. I'm almost impressed by Rubio's long game, Last says here. He figured out that he could hurt the Cuban regime by promising Trump Venezuelan oil money if only the president would use the U.S. military to swap out one dictator for another. Well, we do that all the time. Like Bibi Netanyahu using Trump to further his interests in Iran, or Peter Thiel using Trump to get Greenland. I wonder what the America First crowd thinks about all this. That is pretty interesting. He then launches into item number 2 here, which I don't think is directly related to this, although it does have something to do with Venezuela. The Semaphore article, I would recommend probably even, to you, but certainly even to myself, to get more information because it's really unclear. I hope they have some more information. Like, okay, I understand that the accounts that they put the money in are in Qatar. Like, what is that? How do we, what do you mean? How come? Why did that happen? And the answer is, I don't know. We seized the oil. We sold it. I guess they gave the money to, who did they give the money to? Where do they send? I don't know. It ended up in Qatar, but I guess I would like to have some more information. This article also makes an implication that Peter Thiel is perhaps behind Trump's interest in Greenland. But I want to point out that there's another article that says, another billionaire is the person who's behind it. And I've heard this one before, and I just want to put it on the record and give you an article to read about it if you like. How a billionaire with interests in Greenland encouraged Trump to acquire the territory. Different billionaire. This according to reporting in The Guardian by Tom Burgess, excuse me. The subheader says the U.S. president's friend Ronald Lauder, who first proposed Arctic expansion, is now making deals in the island. Lauder, yeah, like Estee Lauder. Yeah, the family. One day during his first term, Trump summoned a top aide to discuss a new idea. Trump called me down to the Oval Office, John Bolton told The Guardian. He said a prominent businessman had just suggested the U.S. buy Greenland. I mean, imagine Bolton's response to this, but okay. This must have happened while he was National Security Advisor in 2018, it says. It was an extraordinary proposal, and it originated from a longtime friend of the president who would go on to acquire business interests in the Danish territory. The businessman, Bolton learned, was Ronald Lauder, heir to a makeup fortune, the global cosmetics brand Estee Lauder. He had known Trump, a fellow wealthy New Yorker, for more than 60 years. Bolton said he discussed the Greenland proposition with Lauder. After the billionaire's intervention, a White House team began to explore ways to increase U.S. sway in the vast Arctic territory controlled by Denmark. Trump's renewed pursuit of Lauder's idea during his second term is typical of how the president operates, Bolton said. Bits of information that he hears from friends, he takes them as truth, and you can't shake his opinion, even if the person was internally decapitated in a dream and became psychic, apparently. This is less crazy, I guess. The proposal seems to have stirred Trump's imperialist ambitions. 8 years on, he's mulling not just buying Greenland, but perhaps taking it by force. There's probably more information that would be of value to us. We don't have time to get to it all and root out what is it about Greenland that interests Lauder. I mean, maybe it too is about minerals. I mean, some of that might go into the manufacture of their products, or it might be just completely different, or he likes to invest because he's probably not running the cosmetics thing day to day. And he maybe wants to invest in, the treasure trove of rare earth elements, which is mentioned here as the title of a second section of this. But we've heard that claim before, and it seems to, corroborate similar claims, and would come as no surprise then to anybody. Okay, let's see. Other things that I might try to be able to squeeze in. Oh, yes. How about this one? This is interesting. We won't be able to finish this article either, but I want to bring it to your attention. And the comment that I saw in Blue Sky that brought this article to my attention is this one, I think. No, a different one. Let me see if I put this one aside. Is this it? Yes. Okay. So I can read you the comment and then offer you the article in the time we've got left. Charlie Salonius Pasternak. How do you like that? Okay. Who is Charlie? Charlie is a geopolitics analyst, I guess, an advisory at Nordic West Office, where he's CEO. USFP, I don't know what we're talking about. Transatlantic relations, Nordic defense, Finland tech and society. You get the idea? So that's why he would have seen this article and makes this comment from it. The article is from the Barents, like the Barents Sea, the Barents Observer. 4,000 U.S. soldiers deploy to Norway for Arctic exercise. Normal stuff. But Charlie says, I'm wondering whether somewhere deep in the bowels of Nordefco, Nordic Defense Cooperation, it is cooperation, I think. But anyway, but somewhere in the bowels of Nordefco discussions, sitting in a sauna, which is, I guess, what they do, the CHODs, do they say CHODs? CHODs, Chiefs, CH of Defense. Have these countries' chiefs of defense been looking at each other and asked, what will you do with U.S. forces during this exercise upcoming called Cold Response 2026? What will you do with U.S. forces during Cold Response 2026 if the U.S. attacks Greenland during the exercise? That's what they now have to contend with. They're about to do joint Arctic defense exercises with their NATO and other European partners and the U.S. 4,000 soldiers are going to be there during these exercises. If they attack Greenland in the middle of all this, do you turn to the U.S. soldier next to you and say that you're capturing him and holding him as a prisoner of war? Literally what happens? Well, the Barents Observer article, I think, is not about that, but just observing the fact that there are 4,000 U.S. soldiers deploying to Norway for this Arctic exercise. The United States is not drawing down its forces and training with NATO allies inside the Arctic Circle amid turmoil over Trump's threat to seize control of Greenland, says the subheader. Thomas Nilsson is the reporter. This is a very recent article, January 14th. Something to think about. But yeah, it's Charlie that makes the point that worries everybody in all this. Now you got to think about this. What do we do with these guys? Do we continue as normal? Isn't it normal? Are they going to turn their guns on us? I don't know. Nobody knows. I guess we'll all just wait and see. But, maybe there's no mechanism for this. That'll save us. All right, time now to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the... Well, I was going to turn it over to him for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. We'll see what happens, because there's a big... okay. I thought it said big power outage rather than Twitter outage. Okay, power seems to be A-okay there at Netroots Radio. So you'll hear Justice next. I think
you have been listening
caught
to
me by surprise.
Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
I thought it might be a power outage because there was no information. He probably just forgot to hit the send button on what he's got lined up for you. Not that I ever leave enough time to actually tell you anyway. Here it is. I have this news for you. There's no power outage. Everything seems to be fine, and you'll get your report from Justice as expected next, and we'll see you next week.